It's high noon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 6 of Foul Play. I am DeathBlow, as always, your host for the evening, joined as well, always, by Asmith. How you doing today, buddy?
Man, I am good to be alive.
Blevins appears to be in full Phelan mode, and maybe I'm just overreacting because I've been hurt before, but nonetheless, that's 2 weeks in a row without our third host here. So we'll have to persevere and carry on and continue to make passive-aggressive comments about him in his absence. I think that's probably the best way to go about this. Do you agree with that, A. Smith?
Absolutely, it's only fair that, somebody doesn't show up, they get made fun of.
Well, that is fair enough, although unfortunately he's above me in most standings for my fantasy league so far. So I'll have to wait a little bit. Maybe if he keeps it going a little bit while longer, it'll be a little easier. But, hey, Smith, we are moving into the first week of Stage 2 of Overwatch League this week. We've been staggering around and wandering aimlessly for the past week without anything to watch or do to entertain ourselves other than, crucify our SR in queues on actually playing Overwatch, which has been weird. But what have you been doing this past week without the ability to watch Overwatch League? How have you been?
Without Overwatch, it's been crazy. It's been a very relaxing time, I guess. Other than losing all the SR that I ever had, I'm slowly falling off into wood tier. Guess it happens when you actually grind Overwatch. That's what happens. But I had a good week. My wife went out of town, so I just got to chill and ordered pizza and almost burned down the house, but hey, no big deal. It was fun.
A little risky business action, as we talked about, wearing your sunglasses, not wearing pants, sliding around the house. You got to do that when you get the opportunity in this world, so I'm glad to hear you made the best of it while you could. As for myself, yeah, I've been trying to play as much as humanly possible this week. I really missed the coaching and the playing on competitive teams aspect of this game that I used to be so big into, so I'm going to really lean into playing as much as I possibly can on these stage breaks. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Big shout outs to all the podcasters, Mel, Bob, everybody that joined us. A bunch of fans too. I'm not going to go through trying to list everybody because then that just guarantees I miss some people. But, shout outs to everybody that's been queuing with us. The teams may have not had to play, but they've not been completely dark as far as news goes, A. Smith. So what we're going to do here to start off the show is we're going to take a look at some of the new signings that have happened. And first, I'm going to kind of go through them team by team, just to kind of set the stage so everybody gets caught up as to what has actually happened and what players have been added to what teams. And then we're going to look at it from obviously a fantasy perspective here and try to tell you what order we think these players are going to be making an impact in these teams. And you should really be trying to reach out and acquire them in this order. We do have some pretty significant differences here, so I'm excited to start talking about them. At the very beginning, we have 2 trades here. London is selling off a little bit of their talent. They're sending Rascal to the Dallas Fuel. Big whoop in the chat. I don't even know what emote to put in the chat, but get excited, Dallas Fuel fans, because that is a really, really big signing for you guys. London also sending Fissure to the LA Gladiators. A signing I think, and it looks like you think, could have big impacts for both, not necessarily both teams, but at least for the Los Angeles Gladiators, who are acquiring the very, very talented Korean tank. So big acquisition for them. The Florida Mayhem have been very active as anticipated so far in the signing period. They have added Awesome Guy as a tank player. They have added Saya player as a DPS player, and then Zappis as a flex player. He is a flex tank. We talked a little bit, I think, last week about that signing, but either way, we'll look a little more in-depth at it coming up soon. In addition to Rascal, the Dallas Fuel have officially added AKM, and then it sounds like they're going to be adding in another tank player soon, but we don't have that name yet.
We don't know if it's a tank. We don't know.
We don't know. It sounds like it, but again, we don't have any concrete information there. The Shanghai Dragons, obviously, these teams at the bottom of the standings had the most work to do, so they've been the most active so far. But the Shanghai Dragons have brought in Sky Fearless, Gaguri, and Ado into their roster. So those are, oh, I'm sorry, one more. Obviously, the most important, the one for the best team at a bare minimum. Fact Fiction has been signed and is joining the Houston Outlaws. So, yes, as clearly evidenced by both of our rankings of the players and the impact they'll have, we both clearly think it's the highest impact one. Spoiler alerts, it's not. But we'll talk a little more about it here soon. Asmith, why don't we each release our number one player, or number one, then number two, kind of go in that order where we're kind of sharing the load here. But who do you got number one as the top signing player, that you want to target in free agency here for your fantasy league?
All right, number one guy I picked Fisher. Venturing to say that I think he's going to end up starting pretty soon if that trade clears by the time it drops, because he's already in the States. Yep. Fisher's already here. He can easily jump into their practice, start practicing. And I think iRemix has been one of the bigger problems that they've had. And Fisher proves to be one of the better tanks in Korea, or no longer in Korea, I guess, but one of the better Korean tanks who hadn't had playing time due to Gesture's dominance. So I venture to say Fisher's going to get a start pretty soon, and he's going to put up some pretty decent numbers. As long as this Gladiator team doesn't just continue to wet the bed.
Yeah, I've been really, really impressed with what they've been able to do, at the beginning of the stage, a little less so at the end, and I'm hoping that Fisher can bring a little stability to them. Unfortunately, though, I seem to be a little bit more hyped up on your Dallas FOWL acquisition here, Mr. Rascal. The one thing I want to say is it's not an accident that we're both choosing as the number one impacted players here to be guys that have already been in Overwatch League. Their visas are already in place. These guys don't have to do any extra work to get here and to be able to play. A lot of these other players, just because they're eligible to play with their team right away from a league eligibility standpoint doesn't mean they're legally allowed to play for their new employer until they get their visa situation all figured out. So a lot of these players don't get the opportunity to jump right in. Rascal and Fissure both are one of them. But listen, Rascal's going to be a big player here for the Dallas FOWL, I think. I talked about how I didn't think the AKM signing was going to be, made a ton of sense and fit in super, super well. That's not the case with Rascal. Rascal's exactly what they haven't had. He's the Genji player they've been needing for so long. They've had a bit of the Swiss Army knife that he is, the ability to play the goofy heroes. But listen, and I've even talked a lot about how I thought Seagulls played really well, and he has, and I'll stand by that. These players, however, aren't on the same tier, I don't think. I think Rascal is a cut above. He is a big part of why I said the London Spitfire had the number one overall DPS core in Overwatch League, because your number one guy off the bench, Rascal, was such an elite Swiss Army knife kind of player, and that's exactly what I think is going to really help the Dallas FOWL. I don't see Rascal stepping out of the lineup near at all once he gets in there. It might take a week. I'd be a little iffy to play him right away in the very first week, but once he gets that job locked up, I can't anticipate him really letting it go unless there's some big triple tank composition that forces everybody to sit down their projectile player, something like that. That'll be the biggest threat to his playtime. So I think just on upside alone, Rascal has a chance to be in the top 5 DPS player overall. So that's why I'm reaching out and trying to get him in any opportunity I possibly can. Unfortunately, though, I think he's talented enough that he's probably not just sitting on the unsigned players, so you might have to make a trade for him. But if you've got Rascal on your bench, you're all set to go in a big way here. Asmith, who do you got number 2 on your list here?
Number 2, I have the most awesomest of people. I have the awesome guy himself. Awesome guy. He's a Korean tank, and I know it's going to be a little bit before he gets there. However, I think he's going to instantly supplant Swoosh and have a permanent spot starting. I don't think Swoosh just wasn't a tank. Pure and simple, he was transformed into a tank, but he never proved to be a top tier tank. He was there, I don't know the full reasons, probably just because Misfits pulled in all of Misfits for Florida and went with there, but awesome guy is going to be a really good tank for them. I've ventured to say he's going to be starting. He'll bring that Florida team up to a different level. I don't know if that level will be beating other teams, but it will be another level nonetheless. So I venture to say he's going to be a must start when he gets eligible and starts earning that starting playing time. I think he's going to be one of your top 12 tanks, top probably even higher than that on the tank pool overall. He just seems to be a very good tank overall.
No disagreements there. I don't know a ton about Awesome Guy. I just know the kind of opportunity that is available for these players coming in to join this team. And that's why my number 2 player here is Saya Player. Listen, this is a guy that I had when we did on the flagship show, when we did our draft pick of the eligible players for our expansion teams. Saya Player was one I picked. He's somebody that has always been a standout player in the Korean scene to me on the DPS role. I think Logix has been kind of fairly obviously an issue or a liability for this team. Maybe not all the time, but definitely a good chunk of the time, and consistency in the DPS players is something this team desperately needs, and I think Saya Player is going to bring that to them. So as soon as he becomes eligible, I expect him to just be put in that spot. There might be a little back and forth at the beginning while they get things acclimated. I don't know, but this is another situation where I think the upside is definitely there. And I think in order for this team to really stabilize, so if the Florida Mayhem are going to do something crazy and make a push for the playoffs that I don't personally expect them to be able to make, it's going to have to come from a player like this. And it's going to have to be on the back of huge plays from the incoming DPS player. So I'm really focusing on these new player acquisitions and just the sheer upside of it, right? Like, I don't care if I have to cut these guys in 3 weeks. I don't like the guy I'm dropping for now to go get them. So I'll just roll the dice again in a couple weeks when something else happens or a new player gets added to another team, and I get an opportunity like that. So don't be afraid to pick up a player that has a high likelihood of not panning out. Just think of what the ultimate highest end upside could possibly be for that player. And for Saya Player, I think that's very, very high. I think it has the capability to stabilize the entire team, get everything figured out. I'm not putting my money on that. I'm not betting on it, but in the ideal scenario, this is the kind of player that can do that for Florida. So it's something I'm keeping my eye on. Asmith, why don't you start talking next, since you've got Saya Player number 3? So
yeah, I've got the same guy, and Saya Player obviously is a great player. He's overall just really, really great in hit scan tracer. He's a great Korean player, but there was a reason he wasn't picked for the very beginning in FOWL. He's not one of your top most dominant Koreans ever. He's a very solid player. He's a very consistent player, and he can do good things, but he's not going to be your bird ring or your profit level player that will change everything. He's not effect. He's not going to have that kind of effect, but he will be a very dominant player. I will say this: I actually have him. He's the player that I have actually tried to get the most out of the new players on my leagues, mainly because I have a lot that are in the old system, and DPS are rewarded in the old system. Yeah. And I have dropping the likes of Sure for Saya Player. So just to give you an idea of how I think he's going to pan out, I think he's going to be better than Sure, and that's got high expectations. Now I have other really good DPS on that lineup, so dropping Sure, he's like my last player to drop there. So it's a really good team. But anyway, Saya Player is going to do really well. I expect big things from him consistency wise. He's kind of on the level of like a Striker-esque. Now Striker has been rewarded because of the dive meta, but I think, and because of how they run dive, he gets rewarded with a lot of kills, final blows. But I think he's on the same level of tracer play as Striker, if that makes sense.
They're in the ballpark. I can agree on. I think I'll actually expand on that a little bit. I think Saya Player's got a bit more of a bit deeper of a hero pool too, right? Like when he goes into the soldier, he's maintains a lot more of that high level play than a player like Striker does. So definitely a high impact player here. And I think what you said is important. If you're still on an old scoring format, throw all this out, and the top DPS players that we're going to list here in this list overall are exactly what you should be picking up. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see exactly what plays out here, and I want to know how long it's going to take them to get these players in, because that's what we're dying to see. That's the excitement of stage 2, and it's a little. I mean, we should have seen it coming, but I'd be lying if I said I did realize in my head that of course they're going to have visa problems and not be. No, I'm just thinking, they sign them, the contract's done, let's go, week 1, let's see them. But it
didn't mentally click for me either, man. I was thinking, I was like, oh crap!
It took me a minute. It was a little bit of a disappointing moment, but nonetheless, my number 3 player here is Fissure for a lot of the reasons Asmith had him here. listen, I didn't think iRemix was playing actively bad for the Los Angeles Gladiators, but he wasn't stepping up and making plays in a way that if you're going to be a top tier team, this is something that I think Houston especially does really, really well, is they can get carry moments from all 6 of the players on their roster at different times and in different moments. And that's not really something that was true of the LA Gladiators, and that was not really something that was true of iRemix in particular. He didn't have big moments and big carry moments. He seemed solid and okay. I think Fisher's a player that is more than solid and more than okay, and has a chance to give this roster some upward momentum and to give them a bit of a lift here. So while I don't think it's necessarily going to make the biggest impact on the stat sheet for fantasy in the way that it's scored right now, I do think, you know, any solid performing tank player on a solid performing team will have a good amount of value here, and Fisher can certainly be that with this LA Gladiator squad. I'd like to see a couple more additions from them, if for no other reason than player coaches to help in the strategy room, in the film room, would be great. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see exactly what goes on there. And I'm going to just go ahead with my number 4 guy here. He's pretty awesome. It's an awesome guy. So like you said, swoosh has kind of been the problem to me. As much as I love the, you know, teriyaki beef jerky meme, he's just kind of got to get moved around here, and awesome guy looks to be the one they're bringing in to fill that main tank role. So on the sheer upside potential of you go from having a bad team to a middle of the pack team, I think that is the ceiling for the Florida Mayhem to be kind of in that 7-8 range is as high as I'd expect them to be able to get or to move up. But if they can do that, it'll be on the back of awesome guy, and his stats will reflect that for fantasy. So for now, we're already down to guys that are bench players and you're hoping to get some value from. But for the time being, I think awesome guy's one with enough upside that there's a really good reason to go out, pick him up, and store him for later.
Yeah.
Who do you got at number 4 here, Asmith? I'm surprised.
I'll tell you why. Rascal. I think Rascal has every opportunity to be the number 1 player on this pickup list. However, you look at their lineup, you look at who they have and who else they picked up too with AKM, and you think, I'm not 100% sure they know what they're going to do. He has the potential to be a starter. He has the potential to be a superstar. He has potential for me to go buy his jersey next week because I actually like Rascal a lot, and I think he could be the best player on this team.
They got some easy matchups week 1. Wait to see week 2 before you spend.
Yeah, well, I think before I buy a jersey, I'm going to wait till the next season until we actually get some good-looking jerseys. Sorry, I just hate on this season's jerseys in general. Go follow some people on Instagram or on Twitter that make some sweet jerseys. I have in my followers. They're pretty awesome. Anyways, subtle plug. But Rascal, look, he can take over the game, but I just don't know, and I'm not sure I trust Dallas right now 100% with how they've been mixing and matching their DPS players and who's going to go where. So I don't start him instantly, but I mean, if you have a bottom tier guy that you're willing to trade, or somebody that's kind of fallen off, or somebody that may be losing their spot, like Logix to say a player, Rascal might be a pretty good trade there. That you can entice somebody to maybe trade Rascal for Logix, and people look at the numbers and they say, oh, well, Logix has a lot of numbers, a lot of points right now, and Rascal has nothing. That might be a worthy trade. So anyways, stuff to think about. I think he has potential to be number 1 on this list, but I'm cautiously optimistic putting him in 4.
Yeah, there's a lot of mouths to feed as far as playing time is concerned on that team right now, so it's definitely something to be worried about. Lead us off with the number 5 player on your list here, A. Smith. One I'm a little surprised to see here, if I'm being honest.
Number 5, and the biggest reason why I put this guy, I've seen this guy play both Zen and Ana. It's Sky, who is formerly Zufan Jun from Miraculous Youngsters. He was by far easily the best flex support in China, and was shocked that he wasn't picked up at the beginning of the season. I didn't know when he turned 18 though, so he's actually 18 now, I believe, or coming up very, very shortly. Before he gets into the States, he'll be 18, so he'll be able to play. But he is a phenomenal Ana. He has some of the craziest sleep darts. I would venture to say he rivals somebody like Jaehong on how he plays Ana. Just watching him, he's a nutty on it, and his Zen is very, very solid. I think he's easily going to take the starting spot in with the Shanghai Dragons, because the Dragons, obviously, I think a lot of people know that support's one of their weakest spots, and it will be a significant upgrade to this Chinese team. He will be transition quicker with the Shanghai Dragons because he speaks Chinese. He will transition faster than the other 3 Koreans that we have. And I think if he plays to his potential and how I've seen him play, I think he has potential to be a top 7 flex support in the league. He's better than I think anybody that's on the Florida Mayhems. I think he's better than I can list a lot of teams that he's better than their supports.
Cut to a shot of Zupe going, "What the heck, man? What the heck?"
I'm sorry. If you haven't seen this guy play, you need to go watch some clips. He tore up some players.
I will say this. I 100% agree that Sky should slot into the starting role immediately, but I will go more in depth in my analysis of him when he comes up on my list. For my money here, I'm going to go with Ado coming in at my number 5 spot. This is the projectile DPS player that the Shanghai Dragons are bringing in. Because of that, I think regardless whether or not the team is good or bad, I think the DPS players have an easy path to fantasy value. And I just don't want to, I'm not trying to throw a Hail Mary here or do anything crazy. I just think if we slot this guy in with either Dia or Undead, this is a Korean talent. I don't know a ton about the guy. I just know his hero pool. I know generally he's a very well-respected DPS player, from the Korean scene. So I think he slots in here and just has an easy path to points. This is kind of my safe pick among the players here. Not somebody that I want to necessarily start, but if all of a sudden somebody gets sick and you catch wind of it and you need somebody to play, yeah, this is probably going to be somebody that you're going to get 2 full matches worth of play from for the Shanghai Dragons once he's in. We're going to have to worry about the visa issue. It's going to be a while, but if you're in a deeper league, a 10-man league, I think Ado has to be owned and is definitely worth picking up. Let's take a look here. Listen, I'm just going to take the number 6 one. We'll kind of alternate like this. I'm going to go with Zappis here. This is kind of one of those things where it's just like betting on the talent of the player, right? Not necessarily does it make sense how he's going to fit in and how he's going to see play. I just think he's really, really good, and I don't care what role he ends up in. If he gets on the field, he's going to have value, and he's going to be a good performer for the Florida Mayhem. I don't necessarily know how that will be because obviously Manitin, we've talked about it a bit ad nauseum, has been the better performing player for the Florida Mayhem right now through the first stage. So I don't think his job is really super open right now, but obviously when they're performing as poorly as they've been, they're got to be willing to try anything, right? Anything that works better than what's been happening lately, they'll go with if it's going to work out for him. But this is just me wanting to pick up a really talented player that has a lot of opportunity to fit in because of the depth of his hero pool and his shot calling ability. I think is something that might be able to help the team. I don't know. I think he's going to play. I have no idea how. That keeps me from being very confident in picking him up. But again, 10-team leagues, got to grab him, I think. Asmith, who do you got number? I don't know what number we're on anymore. Who do you got next?
7. I got Fearless next. Fearless is a Korean tank going to the Shanghai Dragons. Fearless was formerly on Element Mystic, which was a very good surging Korean team. Had Apex and OWL never happened, I think Element Mystic would have really done well in the next season of Apex. And then all of a sudden we had all this craziness happen, OWL, contenders, everything like that. But Fearless is known for being quite literally, he fits his name as a fearless tank. He is kind of aggro, but not too crazy. He's not quite fraggy level, but he's like fraggy miniature in a way. And I think if we have a Rhine meta coming up, I think he's going to do very, very well. He's a great Rhine player especially, but his Winston is quite serviceable. So I think he might even be more known for his Winston. I'm not 100% sure, but I know he's very good at every tank that he plays. I think he's going to end up starting on that team. I think he's going to take over Roshan's spot. Not that Roshan was bad himself, but I think he's just better in every aspect. So I think that when he comes in, I think you're going to have all your other Korean players coming in at the same time, and you're going to get a big transition instead of a small transition, and that means that this team could go instantly when he comes in to a lot better. Now, not that they're going to win a lot of games, but they may push games to 5 and do things like that, therefore making your good fantasy value.
Well, the next player out of both of our mouths is going to be Gigori
Mm-hmm.
here for the Shanghai
Mm-hmm.
Dragons. So
Mm-hmm.
why don't you lead us off and talk to us about how
Okay.
Gigori fits into
Yeah.
fantasy?
Look, I think Gaguri is a great player. I said this on Around the Payload. I don't think she's the best off-tank option that they had. I think you had players like Void and Late Young that were better options in general. But, maybe they just had trouble luring those players to the team because they're the Shanghai Dragons. So, but Gaguri is great off-tank overall. She hasn't necessarily had success within a team wise, but as a player, she's had individual successes. Um, but I think she's obviously known for her Zarya, but she has a great diva too. She's going to be the starting flex tank. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. MG and Zushu have been very bad. I just think they're the worst 2 flex tanks in the league right now, bar none. And Gaguri is going to raise that area up highly. And if she plays a lot of Zarya, eventually she's going to get a lot more points than playing Diva at fantasy value, because with Graviton, you're going to get your ults actually counted. You're also going to get more kills and more follow-ups and stuff with a Graviton, things like that. You're going to get credit, I think, with more kills, therefore a better option than maybe some flex tanks who play Diva more than Zarya.
Yeah, if this is a Graviton Surge meta where Gigori gets to play a ton of Zarya, we probably have her a couple spots too low. At the end of the day, though, like you said, I just don't see the Shanghai Dragons climbing out of this hole, right? They're going to get better, but they're still going to be one of the worst teams in the league, if not the worst team in the league.
Games,
What's that?
I don't think they have to win games to get fantasy value. As
No,
long as they go to 5, I think it's fine.
but I
Or
do
4,
think in particular the tanks and the supports have a much rougher go on a bad team that's losing. It just becomes way harder, and they're gonna, as a result, no matter how well they play, I think they're always going to be at the back end of the tanks and the supports on the overall for the league, especially in the new scoring system when we have all these Lucio players coming out of the woodworks that are playable, somebody that I can pick up. I feel way more comfortable putting my money on a guy like Boink, who's very possibly in your unsigned players right now, by the way. You should go look for it. Look for some of these Lucio players that we talked about last week that might be available for pickup. I think they might be a better selection than really anybody else on this list from the rest of the way out. And that's why, after Gigori, I'm not going to really add to it because I think everything you said is right. We're probably a little off if it's a Zarya meta. But on Diva, it's going to be rough, but she has a chance to be all right here and fill a role. Kind of like, I said Roshan was borderline playable when MG was in, right? Because he just seemed to work out a little bit better. We can see instances like that, and we had one of them on our leaders list last week because they just randomly had a good week, and that's the kind of thing I think Gigori is going to bring you. So worth owning, maybe playable if you get lucky, but you probably don't want to be starting them. Sky is next for the same reason, except for listen, the flex support role has a lot less HP than Gigori is going to have. So I just worry that the deaths are going to be a lot higher for a player like Sky. I have no disagreements with his abilities, from what Asmith said, except for I'm not maybe as high on his Ana ability, and I'm not sure that the Ana ability is super relevant here because I don't know that Ana really makes a big splash in the meta going forward. It's certainly possible, though. Let's see, and then you've got 3 left, and I've got 3 left. So why don't you hit us off here and talk to us about your third last player on the list?
I've got 4 left.
Oh, you do? Yeah. Okay. So
yeah. So I'll do 2. I got Ado, and the reason I'm not as high on Ado, he may be starting, but Ado is primarily known as a Genji one trick. He does have some tracer abilities and a couple other, but he wasn't even a starter on MVP space. He was not a starting player. He didn't get run out every time that MVP space played. And that's a low to mid tier Korean team. You're not even starting. I I get it, but I just don't think he's that good. Like I think there were so many other options they could have picked up that would be better. I think Shatter 2K would have been better, honestly, as a Genji. If you're gonna go with a whole nother, you know, guy who's gonna have to learn a different language, might as well go with a really good Genji as opposed to an average at best Genji. And I'm just not high on Ado. My next guy is AKM. I think Dallas signed him for a reason. I think they signed him before they knew they were going to get Rascal as well. I think they weren't planning on getting Rascal until the opportunity presented itself, and then they had to snatch him up. You don't miss on an opportunity like Rascal, but I think they were planning on using AKM differently before they had Rascal. When you get a guy like AKM, I don't know exactly where he's going to be starting. I don't know how much playing time he's going to be getting. I think he's going to do well in practice, and he's going to rival in playing time for practice, but I don't think that Kaikai is going to just run him out every time, and that worries me fantasy-wise. If my guy's not getting the majority of the maps, he's probably not getting the majority of the points, and he's not going to be playable fantasy-wise. He may get a decent amount of playing time, but he's not going to get as much as, say, like Ado even. So, I think Ado will be a higher point scorer than AKM fantasy-wise.
Yeah, and I completely agree. Looking at I'm going to go with one here, and then I'm going to let you wrap up because I have basically the same argument for my last two players. I'm going to go with Fearless. It's a very similar argument to Gaguri, except for, like you said, he's fearless. He lives by his own name. He's a little aggressive, and I feel a little bit burned. I learned my lesson when you called Fraggy a preseason sleeper. Like, I loved that choice. I was like mad I didn't have that thought myself, and then it took 1 week for me to just be really, really glad I shut up and let you say it. So I'm going to learn my lesson from you there and just keep this guy down at the bottom. At the end of the day, if I'm wrong and he's pretty good and he has a fantasy impact, it's not a big fantasy impact. So I don't feel like there's much chance that I get burned by ignoring Fearless and just not making any effort to pick him up. So that's what I plan on doing.
I mean, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
I don't blame you for that. But I do think
for the last
digging himself out of a hole.
Yeah, he is for sure. But to be fair as well, for the last 6 players on these lists, we don't have strong feelings at all.
That's true.
It got a little rough. There's not a ton of fantasy value here. This is basically just an exercise for the sake of doing it at this point.
Yeah. My last guy is Zappis, or second to last guy, I guess, because I don't see where he fits in. He's gonna plug in He's gonna plug in somewhere, but I just don't know where.
It could be Lucio.
He could be Lucio. He could be Tracer for all we know. Like there's no real telling what's going to happen with Zappis, and with the complete uncertainty there, you just don't. Like you don't pick him up. I wouldn't pick him up. He's just not going to be a viable option unless you just have like somebody who's like Sato on the bench or something. I just don't foresee why. And we'll go to the last guy. I've got this guy last in mind. You've got him second to last, whereas you have AKM dead last. But the last guy that I've got is Fact Fiction. He just got picked up by the Houston Outlaws, and which is great. But they have one of the best tanks right now in the league. Easy. They have, and Muma's doing excellent. I don't know why Fact Fiction would come in to replace Muma. I don't know why Fact Fiction wouldn't go to, say, San Francisco, where he could easily have replaced Nomi and done a lot better. He has prior synergy with Sinatra, if you're going off that Team USA thing. I don't know why. And it probably didn't go to San Francisco because they didn't offer. And that could be it. Like, San Francisco just is blind to their own shortcomings. That's a very viable thing, but I just don't see Fact Fiction starting. There's nothing about it. If he's not starting, he's not getting fantasy points. He's going to be a bench player. He's going to do great in team scrims.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement. Fact Fiction and AKM, I see no path to playing time for these guys. I see them both on the bench like near 100% unless somebody's sick or burnt out or playing against the Dragons or something like that. Like, those are the scenarios that get these guys in there. I don't think they carry fantasy value. Listen, as an Outlaws fan, I'm so happy that we got Fact Fiction because nobody else got him. That's more than enough reason as a fan of the team to be happy about it. Same with AKM, right? If you're a Dallas Fuel fan and you're trying to like fight with the Florida Mayhem to get out of the basement, yeah, you don't want the Florida Mayhem to pick up a player like AKM. So it's super great for you that you got him. From a fantasy perspective,
he was going to Florida.
No, I don't think so either. But from a fantasy perspective, these aren't high impact signings, and I don't see any reason to spend a roster spot on them. You'll have an opportunity to pick them up in a random draw with everybody if it turns out that we're wrong and they see a huge uptick in play time in the first couple weeks of them being available. We'll reconsider from there, but for now, leave them on the bench, just like their teams are in all likelihood going to do. So let's move forward here and take a look at some of the matchups coming up this week. We expected this to be a short show. I think we just about killed that already. But we will keep trucking along here, looking at the matchups for Stage 2, Week 1. As usual, I'm going to be taking the Atlantic Division, and then I'm going to hand the reins over to Asmith to discuss the Pacific Division. So that leads us off with the Boston Uprising. They've got a tough matchup, and they've got maybe a not so tough matchup here in the first week. It's worth noting everybody's rematching their last week of the last stage opponents. Which is, I think, cool for a lot of teams, and then less cool for teams that, already did their rematch and they happened in the playoffs, and now we're talking about it like the three times in 3 matches that we're playing against some of these opponents. It's a little goofy, but bear with us here. Boston is going to be playing against the Fusion and the Outlaws. Boston has 5 maps to prepare for, which I do think helps them quite a bit. There's a few teams with 8 maps. Their opponents in particular, Houston has to prepare for 7. Philadelphia is tied at 5. So maybe a little bit of an edge for Boston in the Houston matchup. On the overall, I think they're positive matchups. And what are you going to do? Start doubting the Boston Uprising now after how good they've been? You just got to keep rolling these guys out there, keep playing them, and keep an eye on that Houston match, because I can't wait to see what the new meta is going to be. These guys were so close before. They could be this close again. That's going to be a phenomenal match. I can't wait to see it after how good it was the last time around. Definitely keep your eye on that. Should be on Saturday as well, so that'll be one of the closeout games. The next team here is the Florida Mayhem. We've talked about a lot of their additions, but none of those guys are going to be in yet. So it's going to be another rough go for Florida here. They play against New York. They play against Philadelphia. I expect them to lose them both. I would avoid any and all of them at all costs. The one thing that's worth noting, if you're desperate for a support player, maybe try Zebo and just see what happens, because he's the more likely to play the Lucio in my mind. And he's, at bare minimum, going to be a lot happier about it while his team loses. But I just think he's kind of the one player with the opportunity to really defy expectations from a fantasy perspective. Ideally, though, you can leave him on your bench as well. Houston Outlaws, man, 2 pushes essentially as far as matchups go. They play London and Boston again. They did win both of those matchups in the regular, the main week to close out the last stage, but obviously the Boston matchup went to the absolute wire, and the London match got flipped in the playoffs. But at the end of the day, we've talked about it. Long, close matchups for fantasy are phenomenal. We love them. Eat them up. They're neutral matchups as far as who's going to win, who's going to lose, but a huge boost from a fantasy perspective. I want all the Houston Outlaws that I own in my roster. I'm even willing to pick up and play Boink pretty blind right now. I would bench Banny. I wouldn't play him. But, obviously you'd rather play like your Jonax, your Jay Hongs, your things like that, but not everybody got those guys. So if you're on, on the back burner as far as supports go, or rotating people around, Boink might be worth a little bit of a flyer there. Looking at the London Spitfire, they play against Houston and Boston. These 3 teams love to play against each other. Is that? Yeah, I guess that's right, because I wrote it down. I'm not going to double check it now, but I didn't think that London played against Boston in the last week.
I'll check.
Yeah, they played against
Just
New
talk
York,
about
right?
the... Yes.
I don't know. All right, well, check it out. But anyways, the London Spitfire...
I'll talk about this one.
Sure. Well, if I got that wrong, then I've got New York wrong right after it. So check on it. Check on it right now. I'm just going to assume I'm right here. Let's see. So yeah, the London Spitfire play against Houston and Boston. We're double checking.
No, they play in New York.
Okay, so New York and Houston. Okay, so I got that wrong. Okay. Yeah. All right. Sorry. Yeah, so Houston and New York, obviously, this is basically the same exact thing that the Houston Outlaws have. Just two really close, really good matchups that are going to favor all the players as far as fantasy points are concerned. I think Rascal going actually boosts the value of profit by a little bit. It's just one less player that's kind of likely to come in and steal a little playing time in some weird spot. Doesn't change his value much, but just a little bit. Birdring wasn't leaving that lineup under basically any circumstances so far, so it doesn't really impact him at all. Fire up all your London Spitfire players with a quickness so you can play them all confidently, and obviously Gesture just becomes that much safer as well. The big question mark is Badosin versus Hagopin. I don't know exactly how that's going to play out. It certainly looks like it's going to be Badosin, much to the relief of Asmith and his Expert League #2 overall pick that went to Badosin. It looks like that's going to pay off for him, but that's really kind of the last spot where I'm iffy and not 100% sure. But we'll keep our fingers crossed for Asmith, and unless I'm playing against him that week or something, then we'll root the other way. But yeah, we want to see Hago those weeks, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. The New York Excelsior, they have the matchup against London. And they have a matchup against Florida, so they're probably going to stomp. That makes me a little leery of the DPS players, but at the end of the day, you've got to just roll them out there. Expect to see a little bit of Pine. Listen, I have a team where I have a bad DPS core, right? And I've been playing Pine, and when he gets matchups against Florida and Shanghai, he's almost a good start. So I don't think you should be super afraid of using him if you've got him. But generally speaking, you still try to stay away from that. Like it's not the ideal scenario that I'm forced to use him. He's just not killed me in 2 of those weeks where he's played all the matches or all the maps in the matchups against weaker opponents. Meko, I expect a big, strong bounce back performance from him in this week. Obviously, matchups I think like Florida are really good for that flex tank position. They don't get credit for their diva bombs, but they get credit for all the kills that they come from. And I think those come a little more frequently in lopsided matchups. So I'm very confident in Meko this week. Now, the last team I have to talk about is the Philadelphia Fusion. They play against the Boston Uprising and the Florida Mayhem, and they have been not even inconsistent anymore, Asmith. They've been consistently subpar, and I think this team is in a really, really weird spot going into this new meta. We don't know how it's going to be, what they're going to play. We saw them hurt by the fact that, Fraggy's more of a Reinhardt player, and he was forced into Winston on the dive that hurt them in stage 1. So we're looking at maybe a tank-heavy meta, and we're thinking, oh, great, Fraggy can play the Reinhardt. That'll be huge for them. But doesn't that put their DPS players kind of off roll a little bit, right? Like outside their optimal superior hero choices?
Yeah, not as good as Zarya.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, we're talking about taking Shadowburn off of Genji and putting him on Zarya. It's hard to think of that as an upgrade. He can do it, and he can do a pretty good job of it. But that's what worries me about Philadelphia going forward. And listen, fire up and play those DPS players with supreme confidence right now. No worries whatsoever. Expect them to just play super heavy dive and do okay even if they flex. But on the overall success of the team, I really worry, and I expect them to get beat up pretty bad by Boston here. And then I expect them to do just fine against Florida. But it's worth noting, the best Florida looked all stage was against the Philadelphia Fusion at the close of stage 1. So keep an eye on that. That one could easily flip. And honestly, if you're playing any Philadelphia Fusion players, you almost hope it does go a little bit long, that matchup. So don't be afraid of that from a fantasy perspective. But not big high opinions of the Philadelphia Fusion going into the next stage for myself. But Asmith, take things away here. Talk to us about the Pacific Division matchups for week 1.
Look, I get the Pacific Division, and right now we're just a weaker division. It kind of stinks, but what you gonna do? Dallas Fuel's team I'm going to kick it off with. We have Shanghai and Gladiators. Hey, if you remember, just 2 weeks ago, we were like, oh, these 2 wins. I'm still thinking the same thing. I don't think much has changed. You have the possibility of AKM and Rascal playing, and I think that doesn't, whereas you're going to have nobody changing with the Shanghai Dragons, and Gladiators may or may not have Fisher. We'll see what happens, but Yeah, I think it's good news for Dallas. I think they're going to win both games. I think they're going to, maybe it might be close if they're still on the mend. They may be close games, and I think you're going to get a lot of points out of them. Just be a little weary about your DPS with Dallas, because I have no idea what they're going to do with their DPS. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be Effect, Taimu, Rascal, Seagull, AKM. I have no idea.
I just want to make this call. I hate to interrupt you, but I just want to make this call while you have to respond to it on the air. And I'm going to be picking the Los Angeles Gladiators to beat the Dallas Fuel this week coming up. And here's the only reason why. Dallas has 8 maps to prepare for, and the Gladiators have 5. I think that's going to be brutal. But I think
that's fair. I think they're going to practice more on those 4 than they are the other 4. If that makes any sense. I think
it does, and this is all predicated.
Practice more.
This is all predicated on Fissure getting to LA. If he doesn't get there, then I take it back immediately.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's the biggest problem. 8 maps. 3 different teams in the Pacific Division have 8 maps, and that's brutal. But I'd still venture to say, even if you have no idea, you can practice. You know, if they end up with 12 players, which is very possible they will have 12 players, you could have scrimming, 2 different scrim sections, 6 on this one, 6 on this, and it still could be viably a win. It's a legit possibility. I don't think it's going to happen because I don't think their 12th is going to be there in time, because I think they're going to import the 12th player. So we'll see what happens there. Anyways, we'll skip on. I think you play Dallas Fuel players, but DPS you question. Actually, the only 2 Dallas players right now that I wouldn't question would be Harry and Chips, to be honest, because I'm still not sure what they're doing with Tank either, because XQC may be coming in. Dallas is a big question mark. I think they're going to win games, but and I think whoever's in is going to do well, but I don't know what they're going to be doing.
I would play Taimu personally this week. But
you see,
if you have like lock and load, like there's the question exists, right? I'm willing to take that chance on a player like Taimu, because a lot of the speculation is, does he go to off tank? And neither me or you really buy into that too much. But in a DPS heavy or in a tank heavy situation, we can see him playing the Roadhog. So I just think he's like the least likely to sit out for 8 maps. And I don't think he's going to be at 0 maps on the week as well.
We say that, but then he did sit out for several maps, and that was without.
It could.
So I have zero faith into starting. Dallas has become my new London, like when starting players. I have no idea. Like, I don't trust them. I trust that Harry and Chips will be in. That's what I trust. That's all I can trust right now.
Custod Moira, though.
See, and there's even a question there. No, it's possible. All things are possible right now with Dallas, and that's what scares me as a Dallas fan. And it also maybe helps me. I don't know.
It's scary and exciting. If I'm looking at the Dallas, I'm scared and excited about their options, because I've seen teams ruin themselves with options so far, and I've seen teams boost themselves with options. So it's interesting.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But just cautiously optimistic with playing Dallas Fuel players. All right, we're going to move on to the Gladiator players. Gladiators, they play on 5 maps, which is good, and that means they have significantly less maps to practice, and they play San Francisco and Dallas, which are 2 of the weaker teams right now. I think that's going to benefit them in a way that they have the ability to win. They have the possibility to win both of these games. They also have the possibility of these games going to 5, because I think they're all on pretty close to level playing fields right now. If Fisher's in, I think that gives them an even better chance. But right now, I think Beast using obvious start, Shaz, and
it's not a small goose.
The biggest of goose.
It's not a small
goose. Biggest of goose. Yeah, and if he's on Lucio, I think he's going to be even a boost there. But right now, I think Gladiator might be some of your better players to play fantasy-wise. I think they're going to have a better overall time. We'll see what happens, but I think both of these are positive matchups for them for fantasy points. Next, I've got the Valiant. They play Seoul Dynasty, and then they play Shanghai Dragons. Depending on what Seoul Dynasty shows up, they could get another win like they did last time. They 3-0'd them, I believe. and then Shanghai, they just stomped. And I think Shanghai is still going to be a stomp. I don't think it's going to be a question. A lot of people are saying with Lucio coming in, Verbo comes in, and I don't buy into that theory. Here's why. Kariv played the Lucio even on control maps, and we didn't see Verbo until Unko got sick. That was the only time we saw Verbo. I think Kariv may still play the Lucio, and it's a very real possibility that Verbo's still on the bench.
I'm calling Numlocked against Shanghai this time since the playoffs aren't on the line. Give me Numlocked or give me Death Valiant.
I mean, let's see if he actually is practicing with the team, because he wasn't last time, and if he's not practicing with the team, he's not going to play. So it's a weird situation, but I think your Valiant players are not going to do as well fantasy wise because they're going to stomp the Dragons so hard. And I think the quick games like that don't boast well for your confidence, but they will get some points with playing the Soul Dynasty. So we'll see there. They do have 7 maps, which is a little much. It's not the full 8, which is good, but I mean 7's still going to struggle.
All the more reason to split your team and play Numlock, since you can have him on 3 separate maps.
I want Numlock to play. I mean, I just hate it that the dude's been in freaking prison.
Numb reality. That's my prediction. We're gonna see numb reality this week.
For that one guy that bought the Grumility jersey I saw on Twitter. That's your day, man. That's your day. All right, we're going on. Yeah, they're going on to the Shock. They play the Gladiators in the Dynasty, and good luck. That's all I got to say there. I don't see them beating the Dynasty, but hey, last time they played them to 5 maps. So, but the meta shift, I just don't think it's going to benefit the Shock as much. You do have Dak, who is probably the worst Mercy in the league, getting to play over his Lucio, which I think he's probably going to play Lucio exclusively. I don't think he has the aim necessary to play the other heroes. I just haven't seen it. And I think they're going to force the meta that they want. I don't think they're going to play the optimal meta. I think they're going to force what they can, which means Dak might become a viable player, but I don't see this matchup as good for them. I think they're going to lose to Gladiators. I think they're going to lose to Soul, and I don't think it's going to be as close as it was last time they played them.
All right, you've already offended every Lucio player in existence by saying they can't aim, so we're gonna have to.
No, I think Big Goose has amazing aim. I just Dak does. It's a personal attack on Dak. Just kidding. I love you, Dak. I do. I think you're flex real hard. All right,
I'm gonna sit here and let the silence be as awkward as possible.
Yeah. All right, we're going over to the Soul Dynasty now because that was an awkwardness. They play 8 maps, which is going to be rough on them. They do play the Shock and the Valiant. I don't expect Soul to bounce back as hard as people think with the new meta, with Toby on Lucio. I don't expect the Dynasty to bounce back as hard. I think Dynasty will still lose to Valiant. I think they have more problems than the meta, and I don't think they're going to resolve them, but I do think they're going to be better on this meta than the Shock will improve, and I just don't see the Shock getting anywhere. I'm sorry, I just don't. I think they're going to be a stomp, and then there's going to be a loss, and it's going to be interesting with their fantasy points. Don't bank on Dynasty players, because we don't even know what they're doing with their DPS player. We think it's Bunny, but I'm not 100% sure. It could be Munchkin, could be Wakid, it could be who knows what. It's just weird, their whole setup right now. And lastly, we're going over the Dragons. Look, we're Dragons, man. I feel bad for them. They have 8 maps. They have Dallas and they have Valiant. This is not good. They're not getting any of their new players.
Yeah, but 5 King on Lucio.
5 King is a great Lucio. Yes. I will give him that. 5 King is a great Lucio. He was a terrible Mercy, but he was a good Lucio. And we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't count anything out, but I think they're going to lose both games, and I don't think it's going to be particularly close, and I don't think the new meta is going to change your starting opinions of any of your Shanghai players. So Sorry, Shanghai. No wins this week.
I want MG in for Zushu full time. I want 5 King on the Lucio, and I want to see a 2-0 record here for the Shanghai Dragons this week. I want to see all that.
You want that.
I won't see any of those things, but that's what I want to see.
5 King exclusively on Lucio. That actually may be something you see.
And we could see MG on the off tank. That's certainly possible.
I don't trust their coaching enough.
Yeah, well, that could very well be a thing too. It's the way they probably should go. We'll see if they do it. Moving things along here, though, it's going to wrap up the Stage 2 Week 1 preview here. Those are the matchups. And with those in mind, Asmith, we're going to take a look at some of the sleeper picks, some of the players. And again, these have rules now. We defined rules here. So we have to pick DPS players that are outside of the top 20. We have to pick tank and support players that are outside of the top 15 for season-long scoring at their position. So, Asmith, lead us off with your sleeper DPS player for Week 1 of Stage 2. Who are you going with?
Look, we just talked about this guy a little bit. I was talking about Soul Dynasty not knowing what they're doing. I hope they figured it out, because they should know by this time that Bunny is the best option for them along with Fleta. And Bunny is outside your top 20. Thank goodness, because I was really struggling to find anybody else outside the top 20 that could fit here. But I think Bunny's going to be your starter. I think he should play a lot. He should end up getting a win with Shock, and he plays full-time versus Valiant. You should get good value out of him. He actually has a pretty good points per map, which is good news. So just play him all 4 to 10 map, or all 8 to 10 maps. Come on, Soul, just do it.
All right, so for my DPS sleeper, I'm rolling the dice here. I'm taking the risky pick. I'm going with Taimu. I think between the Roadhog, and I think just when you lay out talent-wise on the team, right? And you know, you weigh everything together, his shot calling impact on the team, everything like that. I think this team needs to find some stability. I think they're still searching for that. And I think as a result, Taimu's very likely to be, you know, heavily included, if not on, you know, fully included here. So I'm anticipating no more than 2 maps set for Taimu through their 2 matches here. But like I said, that's a risky pick. I could very easily be wrong. He could play 0 maps on the week. So don't take the fact that I'm listing him as a sleeper as you should just plug him in, right? Like you might rather have a Surefour or somebody that's maybe a little more steady. But listen, there's 10-team leagues. I'm in some of them, and some of them are pretty bad. So don't be afraid to roll the dice on Taimu. You know, if you need that kind of home run player, if he plays every map, we're talking about a top 10 point scorer on the week, I think. So he's got that kind of upside, and I think we have to factor that in and weigh that with his inconsistency issues as far as playing time's concerned.
You know what I want Taimu to be? I've probably said this a couple of times, but I'm just going to go off on it, man. I want Taimu to be Pine. Like, Taimu should be the Pine of this team. With the pickups they got, I really think Taimu should come in when necessary, but not necessarily play every map. I think that'd be amazing.
I think it makes a lot of sense. His hero pool matches up with it. Everything, you know, it makes a ton of sense. It'll be very, very interesting to see what they do with Taimu in particular. But he might be the most interesting question mark on the Dallas Fuel right now. Definitely can't wait to see it play out. And I certainly, despite the fun I like to have with some of the Dallas Fuel fans in the Discord, I do hope to see them complete their rebound a little bit. And it was such a big closing week to get the 2 wins. I don't care how easy the opponents were. When you're going into the last week with 1 and your target for the stage is 3 to just be in the playoff hunt, it was so big for them to get them. I hope that running them back helps. Like, we could be looking at a 5-win Dallas Fuel team here in just 1 week's time. So for the sake of Asmith's sanity, I'll keep my fingers crossed. But Asmith,
thanks, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
We got to build you guys up a little bit. we got to build you guys up just a little bit, so that way, you know, once Houston takes them, it's more of a kick down. You know what I mean? Like, I want that to mean the most, the Houston win. The rivalry's too fun not to lean into it. So
fair enough.
So Asmith, talk to us here about the sleeper tank for the week.
Sleeper tank this week, I've got Zumba. I'm really banking on this Zarya coming into play here. I think Zumba might be the best Zarya in the league. I think that's actually a pretty good thought pattern here. Zumba has an amazing Zarya. Now that I think about it, he is the best.
I was going to say, I think it's
really
safe to say he's the best.
Yeah,
I think it's risky to be like, there's nobody close. Like, there might be a couple close, but yeah, no, he's probably just the best.
Yeah, so I mean, if Zarya's in the meta, I really expect Zumba in the meta, and I think Seoul wants to prove that they can bounce back. So if they want to prove that, hopefully their coaching staff has their smart pants on and play Zumba the whole time. Because if they do and he's running Zarya, I expect big fantasy points out of him. I expect him to be a top 10, maybe top 5 tank if he runs out every map with Zarya.
Yeah,
Full
so
prediction.
For my money here, as far as tanks are concerned, my sleeper is going to be Fissure. I mean, listen, this guy's going from the bench to a theoretical starting role. And I've got that league where I'm sitting there and I've got like Note and Kalios as my 2 tanks. And I'm going into this meta with just no confidence about who's going to see play. I could see them switching 50-50, everything like that. When you look especially at old scoring format, I think Fissure's a guy that, this isn't the points we're basing the sleepers off of or anything like that, but I just want to point out that's the league. Like, it's old scoring format where my tanks are just abysmal, and a guy like Fissure has the chance to really flip a team, right? He's one of these guys that's going from bench to starter. His value is going to change very, very drastically here. So if you're in a desperate situation at tank, by all means, I think Fissure's worth it. And for what it's worth as well, I think you're going to have a little bit of a heads up here, and you're going to know, listen, like, because they play on Wednesday, right? So you're going to have the ability to change your roster. If they put out their starting roster an hour before the matchup, you're going to have the ability to look at it and go, okay, Fissure's not there. I need to get him out. So make sure you're paying attention as the rosters get close to locking here right before the matchups begin. You might want to be looking to take him out, but I do think that he's got a good chance.
Wait for an official announcement, too. There still hasn't been an official announcement that he's actually been traded.
Yeah, I think we knew it was like pending
legal approval.
But I think that just needs to officially happen probably when the league week begins. So I'm guessing to see those get approved on Monday, but that's just guesswork, right? Because otherwise I don't know what they'd be waiting on to approve them. They basically said there's no restrictions for what you can do in trading.
Nate's over here scratching his head like, I don't know what to do. Should I improve it? Should I not?
Right.
It's like, I don't know.
But yeah, there's just got to be something procedural about that hang up, I think. But count on it going through. But yeah, Asmith, look forward for me at the sleepers for supports for this week.
Support guy, I got this guy. I don't know how he's not in. Actually, I do know how he's not in the top 15. He's not in the top 15 because he was sick one week and had 0 points. So by technicality, I'm going to slide Harry Hook in. If you're just looking at his overall points and you're not paying attention to how he does week in, week out, Harry Hook is a starter, period. He's going on to Lucio. He's currently the only Lucio on the team, as long as there is a Lucio, and Harry Hook has been very good. He also has the ability to flex on to Soldier and different things. I know Gibraltar is a map that could be a very Lucio-less Soldier map for Harry on defense. Dallas Fuel / Old Envy used to do that all the time, and that's a good little area for them to think about. So Harry Hook, I'd run him out. He was the second, I think he might have been the top support last on week 5 anyway, so I expect good things from Harry Hook.
For myself here, again, it's a theme with me for the sleepers. I'm feeling risky this week. I'm going with Boink. I'm firing him up. I don't think there's any player in the league that necessarily his playtime is going to change more drastically. If we're expecting... at least players who are remaining with the same team, probably nobody's going to see more playing time and get more of an uptick in playing time here than Boink. He's the safest of my risky calls in the sleeper section, I think, this week. We don't obviously know, things like who the Moira would be for this team. We can't say that definitively. We don't know, let's say the Moira's Bonnie, right? And then it's Lucio. We could see Raucus sit down for a few maps. I really don't know. Supports for this team are a little goofy at the moment to try to pick their play time for, but I just think Boink has been waiting, right? He's been in the in the back end here, kind of waiting for his time. So assuming this is it, I expect him to shine. Him and Big Goose have always kind of been my two underrated Lucio players that I kind of had my eye on for a while through the contenders process, all that stuff. So assuming they can get into it, I'm going to let that carry over and assume nothing's changed, and they're still two top end elite Lucio players in this league.
That's fair.
Fair, and we shall see. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to be either 3-0, like I'm going to be going first for all the sleepers next week, or absolutely none of them. Probably no chance of a 2 or 1 split. That's fair. That's fair. You picked your guys because you're confident. I don't know. Maybe 2-1 just because like the support. You just kind of like the gimme with Harry Hook. It's going to be really difficult to beat Harry Hook on that one. But let's move on to the last section of the show here. We've got the mailbag to talk about. So listen. As we've talked about a little bit, this is the most difficult section of the show since we record so early, like right after the matchups from the previous week. People aren't really looking forward yet. So as always, please send in any questions you do have in the Discord. We have a fantasy mailbag, I think it's called, text channel in the Discord where you can send them in. You can also tweet them to us. We'll answer them on the spot, and then we're also going to include them in the show. But if you do like the fantasy content and you like the mailbag section in particular, make a special point to look forward at your matchups for the following week towards the end of the week prior so that you can get some questions into us to help us out. Would really appreciate it. The Bellman.
We like to answer your questions.
Yes.
We genuinely like to answer your questions. We want you to be a part. You also get a shout out. So
yeah, 100%. And the Bellman has been very good at getting us questions so far. So use the week off to think of some good ones too. Bellman has 6 DPS players here, Asmith, and they are Carpe, Shadowburn, Hydration, Munchkin, Agilities, and Linkser. And he wants to know if any of them should be in consideration to swap out for a new player. I'll let you take this one first.
This is interesting. I mean, I definitely Carpe and Carpe, Shadowburn, and Linkser are you have to keep. There's no idea why you wouldn't. I think Agilities has slotting himself in to be a must keep. Hydration and Munchkin are your 2 question marks. I don't think Hydration is going to get pushed out of his spot. I think he's been playing more. I think he puts up decent points. I think Munchkin is too iffy. I think Bunny's better than Munchkin, honestly, in every aspect. I don't think Munchkin will get more playing time. If you're going to pick somebody, I'd pick Munchkin. Unless you're in the league with me, then don't pick anybody. Actually, drop Shadowburn or Linkser. Do that. I mean, because I will gladly take them. But anyways. But really, I'd say out of your DPS, I'd drop Munchkin.
Yeah, your untouchables, I think you definitely nailed, who's possible to go. I wouldn't be cutting Agilities either, not for any of these guys. I think his play time's been improving, things like that. So it's a question of, if you feel confidently, between Hydration and Munchkin, don't let us sway your decision there. Follow your gut. I think you're okay to cut either of them if you want to. Hydration's playtime is a little more secured, but Munchkin's is potentially more valuable if he happens to win the job over Bunny. And I don't trust the coaching staff to agree with me that Bunny should be the one that they play with for Soul. So we don't know. We obviously don't know who's going to win that out. But I think in 2 weeks' time, it will be very clear which one you should have cut, which is unfortunate. But you have to make this decision now. But you do. So I would pick one of them and try to go get, say, a player. Rascal if he's available, but go get, say, a player if he's not. I think he's going to have a big impact once he gets in there. And you don't have any rush. You're not making this move for a player to play right now. Like, I can't imagine you'd be playing Hydration or Munchkin this week anyways, so you might as well get rid of one of them for a higher upside bench player that might develop into something that helps you go all the way and win your championship, as opposed to maybe play every now and then. Next question here, also from the Bellman. Really appreciate it again. Asking all these questions helps a ton. 6 DPS. Did we copy that over?
No, it's
oh, okay. So yeah, he wants to start. He needs to pick 4 of among those 6 DPS players here. So we talked about the 3. I'll take this one first. We talked about the 3 lock and load. You've got Carpe, you've got Shadowburn, you've got Linkser, you've got to play them, and then I'm going with Agilities here. We don't know for sure what Silk Thread's going to do, when he's going to come in. We know it's going to happen, but I've got a couple leagues where I've been playing agilities week in and week out, and I can tell you his point totals are just fine. They're not scary. I've got leagues with Munchkin. I'm terrified to play Munchkin. I've got leagues with Hydration. I'm scared to play Hydration a little bit. I'm not afraid to play agilities at all. I just understand that he's not going to be a top 15 or an elite DPS option because of his play time, but when he gets in there, he's going to put up good points, and I can count on him for that. Anything to add on that one, Asmith?
I completely agree. I think Munchkin is, no. I mean, I think don't start Munchkin.
Not startable until Soul tells us otherwise.
Munchkin, you never start. I mean, your really two options are Hydration and Agilities, and Agility seems like the clear player to pick here.
Yeah.
It's
all right.
Pretty cut and dry.
We have a question here from Thornrain as well. He's got an option out there. He's in trade talk conversations here with somebody. He wants to know if he should trade away soon to pick up Bedosin in the new scoring system. I think the new scoring system makes this a particularly interesting question. Asmith, I'll let you kind of lead things off. I know we talked this one out and hashed him out with it, so we know like a counter offer. We gave some advice there, but let's just give general yes or no advice on this one.
I don't think I actually weighed in on this one. I think I was waiting for the podcast to weigh on this, and I had to think about it. I personally think Bedosin will be a higher point scorer in total than Soon. However, I think Soon won't get pulled out, and Bedosin has the chance to get pulled out. All in all, I think Bedosin has the chance to really win you games, whereas I don't necessarily think Soon has the ability to single-handedly win you games. If that makes any sense. Depends on the full structure of your team, but I would actually lean toward taking this trade. Just 2 cents. I did blindly. I mean, I did pick Bedosin third overall. Was it third, second overall, something like that.
2, I think.
In the first
round.
Could have been 3 though. Yeah, I don't remember. But I think he's gonna end up really starting. But I do think London has the possibility of throwing in Hagopin just to mess with me.
Sure. So I think if Hagopin gets traded tomorrow, then you snap this trade off in a heartbeat, and you do it because they've picked their starter. They know 100%, and we no longer have to be worried about it. But there's only one way this trade really bites you, right? Or bites somebody. There's only one potential path for a loser here. If everything goes the way I think it's going to, both sides are going to get a solid player. It's a very fair trade back and forth. The only way this goes south is if Hago ends up being the starter over Bedosin. You make this trade, you pick up a completely worthless bench player, and you trade off a very, very startable, very productive DPS player in Soon. So that's why I would lean towards not taking this, because I think this trade will stand the test of time, too. If everything goes the way I expect it to, this person's still going to be interested in doing this trade in 2-3 weeks down the line. I don't see any hurry to go out there and do this. Just tell them, I need to wait and see. I'm not comfortable with the Bedosin Hagopin situation quite yet. And just kind of hang tight on it for a little bit. Unless you're really, really hurting for that elite support option and you're super deep on DPS, I would hang tight for the time being. It's the new scoring system. You can go get a Lucio player. You can do something to kind of patch up your lineup for a couple weeks and really make sure this isn't going to hurt you before you just jump right into it and do it. So that's my best advice. But on the overall, I think this is one of the most fair trade offers I've seen. I just think there's only downside to one side of it, and it clears up quickly. Like, I'll be way more confident in Bedosin versus Hagopin in 2 weeks. If we don't see Hago under any circumstances for the next 2 weeks of stage 2, I'll be very, very confident, and I would be much more willing to
it's super risky.
Yeah,
super risky, but it could either pay off and win you the league, or it could keep you at second or third. Who knows?
Well, Asmith, we had a short show today, and we went with not a long show, but just kind of an average length show, a little over an hour. So a big thanks to you for obviously, filling the co-host shoes. We got Blevins being maddeningly inconsistent for the Sundays. He's a punk. What can I say? You and your life, Blevins. Nobody's buying it. But nonetheless, thanks to you, Asmith, and the Blevins for the work he's done on the show, and to the fans, like anybody that's giving us mailbag questions is my best friend basically. As I write these show notes, it's much appreciated. So thank you all. This should be a big week for us here at High Noon. We've obviously got the flagship show coming up. We've got Tucker from Comcast with the Philadelphia Fusion is going to be on the hot seat this week. It looks like we've got Around the Payload with a big, I don't think that guest list has been set, though I do think I'm going to be on it. So obviously straight away that's the number one most important panel.
You got to fill my shoes, that's all.
Yeah, we do have a champion now on this show, so hopefully Blevins can put aside his hatred of the Outlaws, since we're not playing against each other this week. I think I've only had one time I've been on that show, and they haven't been like in that week one trash talking I'm basically throwing mentality. So it'll be interesting to maybe compete this time around. It was hard to beat Hex and ZP. That was a little bit of a stacked episode the last time I was on it. I'm definitely hopeful.
Yeah.
Any advice for me? Any advice for me?
Say DeFran a lot. I hear that Blevins really likes that. If you mention DeFran over and over.
You lost 20 points on this show right now by bringing him up, because I'm the reason that the DeFran rule exists.
You're right.
So that I don't know. I feel hurt that you would sabotage me like this, A. Smith. I thought we were becoming friends, but I guess
we were. You know what? Look, you were cheering for FOWL this week, and you actually warmed my heart. You know what? I went full streamer mode somehow and won the last. I felt like XQC, and I won the last 2 points. On the last one. I mean, if you didn't hear that epic rant I went on about teabagging, you should.
It was
full streamer.
One of the funniest. The tactical crouch conversation was one of the funniest podcasting moments I've ever seen or heard. So I really appreciate that. But yeah, listen, that's going to wrap things up this week, guys. Really appreciate you all sticking with us, hanging out with us, and discussing fantasy Overwatch. I am DeathBlow for Asmith. You can reach the show on Twitter at HNP_FOWLplay, FOWLPLAY. On Twitter, you can also email us, find things on the website. Go to highnoonpodcast.com, find all the links you could possibly want, and reach out to us. Send us your questions, please, as soon as they're over for next week's show. Send them into the mailbag on Discord. Thank you guys so much. We will see you soon.
See you.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. He threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change the world.